The sterile glow of the underground corridors pressed down on Joran Vale like a weight heavier than his combat armor. The lights never flickered here, never dimmed, just endless strips of white fluorescence reflecting off polished concrete walls. His boots struck in rhythm, sharp, deliberate, the sound amplified in the silence of the maximum security wing. Every step echoed back at him as if the facility itself were reminding him he did not belong in this part of its body. He shouldn't be here. Everyone knew it. The warnings had been clear during orientation: Cell 9 is off limits. Don't approach. Don't feed. Don't speak. Above all, don't look directly at her. Security Chief Marin had leaned close when she said it, her voice gravelly from decades of service. She's not like the others. She'll kill you with a look, boy. Literally. The last one who tried lost more than fingers. Joran had nodded like the good recruit he was supposed to be. Yet here he was again, wandering this forbidden hallway on a pretense of equipment inspection. He had walked past the reinforced doors so many times now, each pass a little slower, each glance a little longer. His official logs were spotless, yet his boots carried a different story. Behind the double-layered alloy, she waited. Lyrian. Even seated, she filled the space of her reinforced chamber as if the room had been built too small for her existence. The engineers had doubled the ceiling height, tripled the wall thickness, but none of it seemed enough. Her shoulders looked as if they could tear through the doorway without effort. Joran estimated that upright she would stand nearly 11 feet tall. Her massive frame was wrapped in the rough gray fabric issued to all high-risk captives, but the clothing did little to obscure what she was. Her skin carried the strange radiance of pale violet dusk, smooth yet marked with faint ridges that ran like ancient rivers down her neck and shoulders. And her hair, snow-white strands that shimmered like liquid frost, fell in tangled waves across her back. She was monstrous in scale yet unmistakably feminine in form, alien yet achingly familiar. The guards called her things: the Wraith, the Beast, the Widowmaker. They laughed about how many lives she had taken during capture, how her strength had crushed armored helmets like tin. But Joran, in his quiet trespasses, saw something they did not. The way she sat motionless in the corner, how her long fingers trembled slightly, not with rage, but with hunger. The monitors told the truth: vitals falling, heart rate shallow, body temperature dropping. They were starving her. He had heard the jokes in the mess hall, the way technicians clinked their cups together and smirked about stress conditions. He'd served in other questionable installations, but never one this cruel. This wasn't study, it was slow execution. Without planning to, he had turned toward the cafeteria that evening and filled a tray with leftovers. Protein stew, synthetic bread, and a cup of flat water. It was not kindness so much as instinct, some stubborn refusal to let another living being waste away under fluorescent lights. When he carried the tray back down the forbidden corridor, another guard intercepted him. "What the hell are you doing, Vale?" asked Officer Bren, eyes widening at the sight. Joran kept his tone steady. "Feeding the prisoner. You're insane. She hasn't eaten in 3 days. That's deliberate. You slide that tray in, and you'll lose your arm before you can scream. I'll take my chances." Bren muttered a curse and stepped back, shaking his head. 2 others had gathered now, eager for spectacle, eyes hungry for blood. Joran knelt at the reinforced slot, slid the tray forward with slow precision. Every nerve screamed at him to pull back, but he forced himself to hold still. A hush fell as something massive shifted inside. The air seemed to change temperature, denser somehow. Shadows swallowed the tray. And then, contact. A hand, large enough to engulf his forearm, brushed featherlight against his fingers. Skin cool to the touch, calloused with scars, violet fading to pale at the joints. She trembled, not from weakness alone but from hesitation. The moment hung suspended, fragile as glass. Then the tray disappeared into darkness. No scream. No attack. Just the sound of hurried eating, soft scraping of utensil against plate, as though she feared the food might vanish. When the tray returned, something lay on it, a torn scrap of synthetic bread, pressed into the rough shape of a five-pointed star. A gift. Or a message. Joran closed his fist around it before standing, ignoring the stares of the onlookers. He did not speak. Neither did she. But the silence between them felt louder than any words. The next evening, against every shred of training, he returned. Bren smirked at him when he passed. Got yourself a soft spot for monsters, Vale. Joran logged his reports without looking up. Just doing my job. But his steps carried him back towards cell 9. Again he brought food, again she waited. This time she sat nearer to the door, her vast silhouette blotting out the viewing panel. When he slid the tray in, he made the mistake, or perhaps the choice, of meeting her gaze. Eyes. They were not the dead pools of a predator. They were vast and luminous amber, with vertical pupils like blades of fire. Looking into them was like standing at the edge of some ancient abyss that still remembered the stars. Fear jolted through him, yes, but not only fear. Something older. Recognition. She tilted her head, studying him, then mirrored his posture, kneeling just as he knelt. She did not eat until he gestured for her to begin. She copied every movement, as if learning the rituals of his species. The tray, comically small in her enormous hands, was handled with a delicacy that unsettled him more than any tale of her violence. Behind him, guards whispered. She's never done that before. She's watching him. Learning him. Joran's pulse hammered, but he did not look away. Because in that moment, he realized something dangerous: she was not just a prisoner. Not just an experiment. She was awake. And she had chosen him. Days bled into weeks, and Joran's routine warped around the forbidden cell. His official duty rosters kept him elsewhere, yet somehow his boots found reasons to circle back. Each evening his hands carried some offering, an extra ration bar, a scrap of paper, a button that had fallen from his uniform. Insignificant objects in the human world, yet when passed through the feeding slot, Lyrian treated each one as if it were sacred. Inside her cell, the collection grew. The gray floor that once bore nothing but scars of restraint now displayed careful patterns, spirals, and clusters made from the objects Joran delivered. She rearranged them constantly, as if shaping meaning with each placement. A language without words, one only he seemed to notice. The others, of course, whispered. Guards muttered about his pet project, technicians smirked when he passed. A few tried to bait him into arguments, but Joran kept his expression still, his military discipline holding firm. He would not give them the satisfaction. Not everyone was content to whisper. Dax Corin watched. He had been in the facility longer than most, his uniform already faded from constant washes, his reputation built on efficiency and ruthlessness. Corin had lost comrades during Lyrian's capture, and though the reports varied wildly, he carried his resentment like a badge. Where others saw curiosity in Joran's actions, Dax saw betrayal. And worse, he saw attention shifting away from himself toward the new recruit. That burned deeper than anything. Careful, Vale, Corin muttered one evening in the monitoring station, leaning close enough for his sour breath to sting. You know what happened to the last guy who got attached to her? He didn't just vanish from the roster. They erased him. Joran logged his reports without glancing up. If you have a concern, file it with Chief Marin. Corin's lips curled. Already have. His tone dripped with satisfaction. And I'll keep filing them. Every unscheduled visit, every contraband item. They'll see soon enough you're compromised. Joran brushed past him, his voice calm. Thanks for the warning. But the warning did not deter him. That night, when his shift ended, he still returned to cell 9. Lyrian was waiting. She no longer lingered in the farthest corner. Tonight her colossal form crouched beside the door itself, her shoulders hunched to fit the ceiling, her pale violet skin glowing faintly under the dim overhead strips. She did not move when he knelt, she only watched, amber eyes alive with something deeper than hunger. When he slid the tray through, she mirrored him again, lowering herself so their gazes aligned across the narrow opening. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she extended one massive hand, palm upward, not to seize, but to offer. Resting there was one of the buttons he had given her, polished from constant handling. She placed it carefully on the tray, pushing it back toward him. A return gift. Something uncoiled inside Joran's chest. This was no beast mimicking a handler. This was intelligence. Recognition. Choice. The next days only deepened the strangeness. Lyrian ate only after he gestured. She studied his smallest movements. How he folded his arms, how he tilted his head, and echoed them with uncanny precision. He began speaking softly during visits, half to himself, half to her. Nothing grand, observations about the shifts, descriptions of the mess hall food, even old songs hummed under his breath. And though she never spoke, her gaze tracked every syllable, as if storing the sounds in some vast internal archive. It unsettled the others more than her silence had. She's protecting him, Joran overheard a researcher whisper after one visit. Like he's her territory. Or her toy, another corrected. Even Chief Marin noticed. She summoned Joran for what she called an evaluation but felt more like an interrogation. Your record shows minimal xenobiological training, she said, eyes flicking across his file. Yet somehow you're comfortable around the specimen. Just doing my job, ma'am. Your job doesn't include feeding it on your own rations. Joran said nothing. Denial would be wasted breath. You know what it did to the retrieval team? Her voice sharpened. 3 dead, 2 crippled. That wasn't defense. That was slaughter. With respect, ma'am, the reports read differently once you cut through the edits. She was wounded first. She reacted. Marin's stare hardened. Interesting interpretation, Vale. The higher-ups are unsettled by your behavior. Some want you reassigned. Others, she leaned closer. Have permanent solutions in mind. Be careful. Joran nodded, expression neutral, though his pulse thundered. He had expected as much. What he had not expected was her next comment. Lieutenant Corin filed a detailed report on you. Times. Durations. Items delivered. He's been watching. So the snake had teeth. That night, Lyrian confirmed what he already suspected. When Joran arrived, her collection of objects had been rearranged again. The scraps and buttons formed a crude map of the facility. And at the edge of the pattern, separate from the rest, lay a torn strip of uniform fabric twisted into a figure. Watching. Corin. Somehow, impossibly, she knew. The night spiraled faster than Joran could react. He had barely finished his routine duties when sharp laughter echoed down the corridor toward Cell 9. Turning the corner, he found 2 guards, Ral and Drin, tossing ration bars through the slot, taunting her. Come on, freak, Ral jeered. Beg for it. Let's hear you make noise. Drin's recorder glowed red in his palm, capturing every cruel second. Enough, Joran said, his voice iron-flat. They startled, then sneered. Relax, Vale. Just recreation. Before he could press further, another figure approached, the night shift supervisor, Lieutenant Sarah. Her tone cut like a blade. Recreation isn't on the roster. Return to posts. The guards mumbled excuses, slamming the slot shut as they retreated. Joran turned to follow, but then. The sound came. A low, thunderous growl that built until the walls themselves vibrated. A slam rocked the reinforced door, bending the frame. Another strike shattered the control panel. Sparks hissed. And then, The door gave way. Lyrian erupted into the corridor like a storm of muscle and violet fury, her restraints dangling broken, her white hair flowing wild. 11 feet of rage filled the narrow space, her amber eyes burning brighter than the alarms that screamed around them. Guards froze in terror. One fired. The bolt struck her shoulder, but she did not falter. She seized Ral by the throat with terrifying ease, lifting him high enough for his boots to scrape the ceiling. Drin reached for his baton, only to be swatted aside into the wall with bone-cracking force. Joran stepped forward before instinct could stop him. Lyrian. His voice was calm, quiet against the chaos. Her eyes snapped to him. Recognition flared. For a moment, Ral's life hung in balance, her massive hand tightening. Then, slowly, she loosened her grip. Ral dropped gasping to the floor. The others shouted into comms, calling reinforcements, but Joran could only see her, trembling, shamed, her colossal body folding in on itself as she backed toward her shattered cell. She lowered herself to her knees among her collection of trinkets, head bowed like a condemned prisoner awaiting judgment. The alarms howled, but the true danger came not from her fists, it came from what the council would decide in the morning. The chamber where the council gathered was colder than the corridors, though no one ever admitted they noticed. 12 hours had passed since Lyrian's outburst, and the facility vibrated with tension. Alarms had quieted, damaged sections sealed, but the memory of her eruption hung in the air like smoke. Joran Vale stood at the back of the council room, officially summoned only to give his statement, but everyone knew that wasn't the real reason. Chief Marin had insisted he attend. He suspected she wanted him to see how close the axe hovered. At the head of the table sat Warden Kellis, broad and stone-faced, with eyes that never seemed to blink. Around him clustered section chiefs, security coordinators, research leads. A holographic representative of the governing authority hovered above the far seat, its face blurred into anonymity. Termination is the only option, Kellis declared, voice carrying like thunder. The specimen is irredeemably dangerous. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. With respect, sir, Joran said, stepping forward before fear could silence him. Termination would be a mistake. The warden's gaze sharpened. You're out of line, Vale. She reacted to provocation, Joran continued. The guards taunted her, broke protocol. I witnessed it myself. She, Kellis repeated, his lips curling around the pronoun. Interesting word for a monster. Joran held his ground. She could have killed us all. But she didn't. She showed restraint. The murmurs swelled louder. Some nodded. Others frowned. Across the table, Dax Corin leaned forward, his eyes burning with contempt. This is exactly what I warned, Corin snapped. Vale is compromised. He's obsessed with the specimen. Dr. Halren, the research director, adjusted his thin spectacles. Actually, restraint of that magnitude is remarkable. Worth studying further. That's not restraint, Corin barked. It's calculation. It knows killing us guarantees its own destruction. It's biding time. Marin interjected, her tone cool. Or it recognized Vale. Which suggests a level of cognition we've barely begun to document. Corin slammed his hand against the table. You're entertaining fantasy. He's blinded. He's feeding it contraband. He's... Enough, Lieutenant, Kellis cut him off, but his gaze never left Joran. A slow smile crept across his face. Vale seems confident. Confident enough to put theory into practice. Joran narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? The warden stepped closer, lowering his voice until it slid like a blade across the room. We lock you in with it. No weapons, no comms. Just you and her. If your faith is correct, perhaps we reconsider termination. If not, well, the problem solves itself. Marin shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. The others exchanged glances, some curious, others satisfied. Corin's smirk stretched cruelly. Joran understood immediately, this wasn't an experiment. It was a quiet execution. But also, the only chance she had. I accept, he said. Kellis blinked, as though he hadn't expected agreement. You understand the conditions? I do. An hour later, Joran stood outside the repaired door of Cell 9. 2 guards flanked him, rifles primed. Behind glass, Kellis and Marin observed. Last chance to reconsider, Marin said softly. I'll be fine, Joran replied, though his pulse thundered in his throat. The door slid open with a hiss. Lyrian sat within, shackled again, head bowed beneath the harsh light. The chains seemed laughable, insultingly inadequate against her strength. Yet she made no effort to break them. The door sealed behind him with a heavy clang. Silence closed in. Joran did not move at first. Neither did she. They simply breathed, his shallow, hers deep and resonant. Finally, he stepped forward, slow and deliberate, then lowered himself to the floor, cross-legged. I'm Joran, he said quietly. The first direct words he had spoken to her. Joran Vale. Her head lifted slightly. Those amber eyes caught the light, reflecting it back at him with uncanny brilliance. I'm sorry, he continued, keeping his tone steady. What they did, Ral, Drin, it wasn't right. You didn't deserve that. Her posture shifted, shoulders easing by a fraction. I'll be here for a while, he added. The warden thinks you'll kill me. At that, she finally moved. Slowly, carefully, she shuffled forward, the chains clinking against the floor. When she stopped directly across from him, her massive hand extended. Resting in her palm was the untouched meal tray from earlier. She nudged it toward him. Joran blinked, realization dawning. She thought he had been punished, denied food as she once had been. She was offering him hers. That's for you, he whispered. You need it more. Her brow furrowed at his refusal. She pushed the tray closer, insistent. Understanding, Joran broke off a small piece of bread and ate it in plain view. Then he pushed the tray back. Together, he said softly. She stared at him, motionless. Then, almost ceremonially, she tore the bread into 2 exact halves, offering one back. He accepted. They ate in silence, the first shared meal of their strange captivity. Outside, Dax Corin glared at the monitors, seething. He had expected blood. Instead he watched them eat like equals. Days passed in this strange coexistence. The cell was too small for her, too vast for him, yet somehow they found balance. Joran spoke often, telling stories of the surface, of oceans he'd seen, of stars above military outposts. She never answered, but she watched, listening with an intensity that unnerved him. Each day, only a single tray arrived, deliberately meager. A test, or torture. But every time, she divided it precisely in half. He tried to refuse, to urge her to take more, but she would not. On the 3rd day, the water ration never came. By evening, his lips cracked, his throat raw. Lyrian noticed immediately. Without hesitation, she pressed her hands to the wall near the cell's sink, listening. Then she drove her fingers into the seam of the pipes. Metal groaned, water trickled through. She cupped it in her enormous hands and held it out to him. Joran hesitated, but she made a sound, low, urgent, not a growl but something closer to speech. The first vocalization he had heard from her. He knelt and drank from her hands. The water was cool, metallic. Salvation. That night, for the first time, he slept deeply, unafraid. But on the 5th day, fever struck. He woke drenched in sweat, the room tilting dangerously. His skin burned, his breath ragged. Poison, dehydration, he could not tell. Lyrian was at his side instantly. Her massive hand pressed his forehead, cool against fire. Concern etched across her alien features. She tore strips from her garment, soaked them in trickles of water, laid them against his skin. She urged him to drink, steadying him when fever spasms shook his frame. Outside, he dimly heard voices. Medical personnel discussing his condition. Refusing to intervene. Part of the test. They wanted to see if she would let him die. Instead, she cared for him with relentless focus. When his body shook, she held him still, her strength unyielding yet gentle. When delirium clouded his words, she hummed low notes, soothing in a way that felt older than language. But as his fever worsened, she made a choice. With sudden fury, Lyrian turned to the door. Her hands dug into the reinforced alloy. Metal shrieked, bent. Alarms screamed as red light bathed the corridor outside. She returned to him, gathering his limp form as if he were made of glass. Cradled against her chest, his head beneath her chin, he could feel the thunder of her heartbeat. Then she stepped through the ruined doorway, carrying him into chaos. Guards converged, weapons primed. Stun rounds slammed into her chest, her back, her arms. She staggered but never loosened her hold. She hunched low, shielding him with her colossal body, each impact tearing violet blood from her skin. But still, step by step, she advanced, toward the medical wing, toward the only chance he had. Through 5 security levels she carried him, leaving guards sprawled in her wake. Not broken by her fists, but simply overwhelmed by her unstoppable determination. At last, she collapsed to her knees before the medical bay doors. Shuddering, bleeding, but still clutching him safe. Weapons surrounded her from every angle. Even wounded, she dwarfed them all, violet skin streaked with blood, white hair tangled across her face. Her eyes burned like suns. She would not let go. The standoff outside the medical bay felt like time had thickened into tar. Guards shouted orders over one another, rifles raised, batons charged. Yet none of them dared to take the first step closer. Lyrian knelt in the center of the corridor, her enormous frame heaving with exhaustion, violet blood dripping in dark rivulets onto the sterile floor. Cradled in her arms, Joran Vale drifted between fever and consciousness, his face pale, lips cracked. "Drop him," one guard barked, though his voice cracked halfway through. She did not move. Instead, her amber gaze swept across the ring of soldiers. Not hate, warning. A primal message no translator could miss: he is mine to protect. The medical bay doors slid open with a hiss. Chief Marin stepped out, expression unreadable. Her presence quieted the chaos, if only slightly. She looked from Lyrian to the dying man in her arms, then back again. "Let him through," Marin said at last. The guards hesitated. "That's an order." Slowly, carefully, Lyrian lowered Joran onto a gurney wheeled forward by trembling medics. She did not release him until her fingers brushed the fabric of the sheets, ensuring he was secured. Then, with a deliberate motion, she folded her hands behind her head and bowed forward, offering herself up. The guards swarmed instantly, snapping restraints around her arms, her legs, her neck. She did not resist. Joran was wheeled away in a blur of motion and bright lights. His fevered eyes caught one last glimpse of her, kneeling in surrender, before darkness claimed him. He awoke to silence. The kind of silence that meant isolation. The walls of the recovery chamber were bare, humming faintly with life support monitors. His body ached, but the fever had broken. Tubes fed water into his veins, sensors clung to his skin. "Welcome back," Chief Marin said, stepping into the room. She regarded him with the same cool stare she always carried, though something softer flickered beneath it. "How long?" Joran rasped. 3 days. His throat tightened. "Where is she?" Marin's jaw flexed. "Contained. Tighter than before. The council wanted her terminated immediately, but, she exhaled. Your little display complicated matters. She saved me, Joran said. She endangered the entire facility. He pushed himself upright despite the protest of his muscles. And still, she didn't kill anyone when she could have. You know that. Marin's eyes lingered on him, then she said quietly, not everyone sees it your way. The warden least of all. Kellis wasted no time proving her right. When Joran was strong enough to walk, he was summoned to the council chamber once more. Kellis loomed at the head of the table, Dax Corin seated smugly at his side. The atmosphere reeked of judgment already past. You've made your sympathies clear, Kellis said coldly. You've risked lives. You've undermined protocol. The only reason you're still breathing is because some members of this council are entertained by your theory. Joran stood tall, refusing to flinch. She's not what you think. You all saw it. She carried me to safety instead of letting me die. Because you're her toy, Corin sneered. Her pet. Don't delude yourself into thinking it's anything else. Enough, Kellis snapped. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a growl. The council votes in 2 days. Termination is almost certain. Consider yourself relieved of duty until then. Joran left the chamber with his fists clenched, his mind already racing. He could not let it end like that. The next night, under cover of silence, he returned to the high containment wing. The reinforced corridor thrummed with the weight of double guards and fresh security nodes, but Joran had spent weeks memorizing routines, patterns, blind spots. He reached cell 9 unseen. Through the viewing panel he saw her. Lyrian sat chained to the far wall, her posture slumped, violet skin marred by healing wounds. Yet her eyes, when they found him, lit like embers fanned back to flame. She tilted her head toward the slot. Even bound, she still expected him. Joran pressed his palm against the glass. She mirrored it instantly, her colossal hand dwarfing his on the other side. The chains rattled with the movement, a cruel reminder of how fragile her position was. We don't have much time, he whispered, though she could not hear through the barrier. His resolve hardened anyway. He would not let them execute her. The council's decision came swift. Termination approved, Kellis declared, voice resonant in the chamber. Effective immediately. The words hit Joran like a strike to the gut. He knew then there was only one path left. Escape. The alarms began before the council session had even adjourned. Cell 9 breached. Security feeds flickered to static as lights across the lower levels cut out one by one. Joran was already moving, sprinting through the corridors he had memorized. His clearance codes had been revoked, but chaos created opportunity. When he reached the containment wing, the walls shook with the sound of tearing metal. The door to cell 9 lay crumpled like paper, chains strewn across the floor. Lyrian towered in the doorway, her white hair wild, her violet skin streaked with fresh wounds. And in her hands, his stolen access card, slipped from one of the guards she had overpowered. Her gaze locked on him. Not desperate. Certain. Without a word, she extended her hand. He took it. They moved like shadows through the crumbling facility. Guards converged, but Lyrian swept them aside, not with lethal force, but with the blunt inevitability of a storm. Her massive arms shielded Joran as stun rounds cracked against her skin, as batons sparked against her back. She staggered but never fell. Through security gates, through blast doors, up stairwells too narrow for her bulk, she forced a path. At times she crawled, her giant frame scraping walls, her shoulders tearing fixtures loose. Yet she pressed on. Always forward. Always carrying him when his strength faltered. The deeper alarms howled, containment breach, catastrophic failure. It no longer mattered whether they reached the surface. They could not stay here. Finally, a final blast door loomed ahead, sealing the exit tunnel. Beyond it lay the shuttle bay. Their only chance. Corrin stood before it, weapon raised, eyes gleaming with triumph. "You won't leave here alive," he spat. "She's a beast. You're a fool. And I'll finish this myself." He fired. The shot never reached Joran. Lyrian moved faster than thought, intercepting with her body. The impact scorched her shoulder, violet blood splattering the walls. She roared, not of rage, but of defiance, and closed the distance. Her hand crushed the weapon like foil. Her other arm swept Corrin aside, slamming him into the wall hard enough to silence him. She did not kill him. She chose not to. With her free hand, she tore the blast door controls from the wall. Sparks flew. Metal screamed. The door groaned, then shuddered upward just enough for them to slip through. The shuttle bay stretched ahead, cavernous and echoing, its ceiling opening into the night sky. Stars glittered beyond, sharp and cold. Lyrian staggered, her wounds catching up with her at last. Joran caught her arm, steadying her despite the absurd mismatch in size. "Just a little further," he urged. Together, they stumbled toward the waiting shuttle. Behind them, the facility burned. Ahead of them, the unknown waited. But for the first time since Cell 9, Joran felt something fierce in his chest. Hope. And that's where we leave Joran, Vale and Lyrian, standing at the threshold of freedom, with the stars above them and a galaxy of unknown challenges ahead. Their story began with chains, silence, and cruelty, but ended with choice, defiance, and the fragile seed of trust between two beings who should have been enemies. What happens next? That's for another chapter. But the message of their escape is clear: compassion can be more powerful than fear, and even within the coldest corridors of control, connection finds a way to break free. If you enjoyed this reimagined tale of loyalty and survival, don't let the story end here. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into science fiction narratives, from classic epics to bold reimaginings. Hit that like button to let me know you want to see more stories like this one. And share this video with a friend who loves sci-fi as much as you do. Because stories like this aren't meant to be kept in the dark. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep looking to the stars.